Good evening. It's 7:33. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Darien Board of Finance to order. First item on the agenda, as always, is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? Okay, hearing none. This is a budget workshop, so there are 5 different areas that we're going to cover tonight, 1 being police, 2 fire departments, 3 the fire marshal, 4 library, and 5 a brief discussion on post 53. I'm actually going to recommend that we go in reverse order and start with the library. And I'm just going to remind folks, like from the library or police department or others, when we're discussing your budget, if we ask questions for you, just either come up to the podium or just sit at the table there, and maybe if we could just scoot the microphone in the middle, just so that we can, the folks listening on TV can hear. So the first item we're going to run through is the library. So on the library, we had myself, Taylor, and Malin. Kira, how are you?
Very good.
Yeah, thank you for coming tonight. So. Sounds like the librarian here.
Actually, it doesn't sound at all like there is librarian here. It's very loud.
Okay, so maybe just as we get started here, the library is projected to be up, 3.3%. And I think if you want to just update us, I know there were 2 subsequent changes, one regarding healthcare and another regarding another, small change.
Sure. So a few weeks ago, we reran our healthcare numbers. Instead of being roughly 11% up because of some changes, it's more like 9%. So that yielded a savings of a little over $12,000. So we had contacted everyone to say, okay, we could knock about $12,000 off the top there. Then subsequently, we had a very good meeting with Taylor and as well as members of the RTM and Lynn. And Pierre actually noticed that there was a cell on my spreadsheet that wasn't calculating correctly, so that knocked up the price or the overall total about $15,000. So then we've come in now at our current increase at about 3.4%, or about $153,000 and change year over year in terms of the dollar amount increase.
Okay, and on the healthcare, the library employees are all in the state plan?
Yes.
Currently? And
yes.
How many years have they been on the state plan?
I think this is our 6th or 7th year that we've been with the state partnership plan, always administered through Anthem, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and I have to say the increases have been, at least over the last 6 or so years, pretty minimal. I think last year it was something like 2.5% or 3%. It was pretty low. So this year was the highest it's been for us over the past few years, but overall it's been a great value, and our employees really like the plan as well.
Okay, Lynn, Taylor?
You want to go first?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah, it was a great meeting. Thank you. I thought we had a few discussion items that were really helpful. As you might remember, we've been sort of helping the library get a lot of their critical staff closer to benchmarking salaries. For the last 4 years, we're in year 4 out of 5 of a program to help bring those salaries up because we were experiencing high turnover. So I'm glad to hear that that has been helping, and we're not seeing as much since we've been doing that. So, hopefully after year 5 we can maybe back off a little while, but it seems like a reasonable rate to be going up 3% if that's what surrounding towns are doing. The other kind of major discussion we had, which I thought was interesting, was about allocation of salaries to the Friends budget. Because if you don't remember, the Friends cover all books, capital investments, programming, and technology.
Technology, staff development, basically, anything that's not core operational building expenses and like 99% of, salaries and benefits.
Yeah, and so they are very careful about allocating a percentage of the salaries of those folks who help with the Friends, items to the Friends budget. So it is kind of a large number, and we did discuss whether or not programming should really be, if it's not fundraising programming, if it's just programming, should that be in the town budget? And at the end of the day, we have roughly $6 million being spent at the library every year. Roughly 1.2 million of that comes from the Friends, and the town does the other part. I'm kind of indifferent. I don't know that we need to go to lengths to move that around. It seems very in line. Like, I have no problem with any part of this. It's 3.4%, very reasonable, and thank you for your attention to it.
Yeah, of course, thank you. And we appreciate the support as well over the last few years to help us on those salary lines. It's been very successful and very appreciated.
And the staffing expense this year went up by exactly 3%.
Yes.
And I think that was no change in FTEs.
No change in FTEs, no. We're able to, in that 3%, bring up what we call the last couple areas of our green circle folks. So this year we're prioritizing people who have a master's in library and information science, who work part-time but weren't at the hourly benchmark, as well as having everyone else eligible for up to a 3% merit increase. But we were able to accomplish those within that 3%.
Yeah, I think you all know that most of the libraries in our area have unions, so trying to at least keep the staff in the right range is a good goal.
I think also when you looked at one of the questions we had received from the public was relative your overall staffing expense as a percentage of the overall expenses. And I know originally when one of the questions that came in, they weren't necessarily comparing sort of apples to apples. They were only looking at the expense as a percentage of the town contribution, not the overall.
Right.
And that had us basically in a 75% range, which was right on par with
Right.
4 or 5
Pretty
of them.
much where all of our peer libraries are, exactly.
Yep. In terms of the fundraising that the Friends have been doing, how has that been in terms of the consistency level? Because that's used to support a lot of the maintenance or CapEx.
Yes, all of our capital and all of the stuff of the library, the books and the programs, et cetera. And knock on wood, our fundraising has been very good so far this year, especially. We don't like to count our chickens, but so far we're up, over last year in terms of fundraising brought in thus far this year. We talked a little bit on the call too, and Jack had asked a great question about, the changes generationally and demographically in terms of fundraising. And this is something all nonprofits are sort of thinking about across the country, which is, especially the newer generation of givers give differently, aren't as consistent. So, you might, as we're starting to lose an older generation of givers who gave consistently large, generous gifts every single year like clockwork, as that generation goes away, it's not a one-for-one replacement. So you're not looking for one more donor to replace that donor or that family. You might have 3 or 4 new donors who are giving at a slightly lower level to sort of make up that gap. So the fundraising strategy becomes a little bit different, and so one of the things we've done over the last few years is hire a development coordinator, which, we've always done development. We've always had great people on staff who are wonderful at fundraising, but hiring someone who that's their only job, fully funded by the Friends, to really think about strategy and outreach and, targeted marketing and messaging, so that we're staying ahead of these trends, making sure we're not falling behind on our fundraising. So far, so good.
Okay. Maybe just for the rest of the board's benefit, it's been a couple of years that we've been having discussion around putting an actual grant, a piece of paper in place, so that, historically we've sort of made this grant, but there's never been anything sort of on paper to sort of evidence it, like we do a lot of other grants. So worked with John and Jen, and before that Kate, in terms of a relatively simple sort of one-page grant agreement that'll just sort of document the fact that we're making this grant and things that are absolutely commonplace and have been for as long as I've been watching these budgets, things like what they use that grant for, the reporting that they always do in terms of keeping us up to date in terms of where their budget is, in terms of, I think it's only been a couple years where we've had small excesses in the budget that have been returned to the town. So just simple things like that would be documented in sort of a one-pager, and that we would do sort of either upfront or once each year in connection with that grant. I think that's, Jen, it's kind of 99% near final.
Yeah.
Yes, we got a draft, yep, was sent to us. We're just looking at it, and having our council take a look, and yeah, I think we want to, get that moving sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and again, I don't think that was just for the public. There wasn't a result of any problem. I think it was just kind of for good practice. We thought it would be consistent with the way we make other grants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, any other questions?
Nice job.
I think it was great. Appreciate the work that you guys do. Appreciate all the coordination you do with Jen and the rest of the team here at Town Hall in terms of keeping us up to date. So thank you.
Jim, just one quick question.
Yep.
I know you track activity. Have you seen any, I'm trying to remember when New Canaan's library opened. Have you seen any effects of them being open?
I mean, I've looked at their statistics. Their statistics are way up from their year over year, which makes sense. They opened a brand new building, so that tracks with what happens when you open a new building. Our visitor count, our door count, our program attendance is actually way up. So, we are still, trending. We're very close to pre-COVID. That's been our goal ever since COVID, is like we want to get back all of our metrics to where they were before the pandemic, and we're in like spitting distance. We're pretty close now. So the last 3 years, things just keep ticking up, which is nice. And I keep joking, it's not really a joke, our biggest challenge is the parking lot. Because we're so busy and because we have so many people in the building and programs, our biggest headache is people not finding a spot, and sometimes parking in the police lot, which we're very sorry about. We really discourage them from doing that.
The Internet Exchange lot.
I'm sorry?
The Internet Exchange lot.
Yes, exactly. So, that remains our biggest headache, but, it's somewhat of a champagne problem, so.
Thank you.
Okay, any large capital projects planned in the near future?
We have a lot of capital projects on our wish list. We are in still, I would say, the quieter phase of the beginnings of a capital campaign, reaching out to donors about some of the funner projects, but less fun that we're probably going to do just from our endowment. Something that the Friends will be supporting is probably a pipe that needs to be replaced in the basement that the children's library bathroom is connected to, so you could just imagine all the terrible things that go down the toilet in the children's room. That pipe needs to replace, so that's probably going to happen this year or sometime after the summer. As well as our fountain outside needs to be resurfaced, the one with the lovely heron statue, so that's another project that our trustees will be looking at, probably funding from the endowment this year or next. But any really big, exciting plans, we're going to wait until we get some major donors behind some of that.
Okay, any other questions? Much appreciated. Thank you to the board members in the back. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Ken. Okay, why don't we go next to police? Sure.
I guess first, thank you for Chief, Captain Brent, for showing.
Commissioner.
Commissioner, excuse me. So let's go through the police budget, just kind of highlights. I'll talk about some of the large increases that we're seeing. Open for questions. Just as a little background, Jim and I met with police a week and a half ago. That sounds right. We had a few members from F&D there, public health, so really productive meeting. There was about 12 of us there, something totally like that. So two major drivers here. So if you look at the overall increase, $615,000, about a 6.5% increase. You see patrol up there for $398, almost $400. and you see stations operations for 129. So if you kind of look at that in total, it's 515 of our 615 overall number. Sorry, 525 overall number. Jen, can we open up patrol, please? So we get a little granular data here. So I want to point out, can we go up where the large salary? Or is it
Oh, you know what,
down?
I opened up the wrong thing, hang on one second.
400,000, I think.
There you go.
Okay, hold on, let me just find my, where's our increase? Yeah, can you go to the right there?
Yep.
Yeah, what I was looking for here is line 100 there. When you guys look at full-time salary, you'll see a new officer is being proposed, and then we've got our step-ups in terms of salary increases.
I just want to clarify, that is not an officer being proposed for this year. It was funded at a half a year in
Half a year,
fiscal
sorry.
'24, and this is just a full year of funding. So year over year, it's a significant impact, but the headcount was already increased last year.
Right. So you're looking at the full year there and the step up. So 282,000 of that increase. The other major driver here is the overtime, $85,000 increase. And what we did there is, and Captain did a great job on this, and if anybody wants to see it, I can pass it around to the group. I guess traditionally, Jim or the team, if you want to kind of chime in on some of this stuff. Traditionally, I think we're under budgeting, lack of a better word, overtime. So what Captain did, and I think in a great memo that, like I said, I can pass around to the group, is basically, I would say, almost true this up to actual numbers, right? Instead of like under budgeting this, let's put a number in there that we think is actually a true number that I think is an indication where we're going to be. So that's the 85 number that you're looking at there. So when you look at those two numbers, it's a majority of our increase sitting in the patrol area.
I think when we discussed it, there was almost a structural piece to it in terms of overtime is required to deal with sickness, vacation, training, injuries, other types of things. And then there's overtime that's necessary if we're not floating right at like 52, or in this case, 53 full officers. And so I think that's why, like historically, if you were to go back and look at the actual salary line item, and we're going to compare it to the actuals a few years ago as opposed to the budgeted, for the last few years, we haven't been at full staff because of retirements or departures. We haven't been able to kind of bring new people on at the exact same cadence that people have left. So we've been operating slightly below the fully budgeted squad. So some of that has been made up for at overtime. And I think what this is doing here is, while we're budgeting for the 53, we're also budgeting for the expected amount of overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will add, we are at 53 technically with 3 offers that we have out, but part of that overtime, Jim, to your point, is we have 3 officers that are going to be going to the academy, and that's for a 6-month period. Right, so that's not immediately filled per se, but they are hired in terms of headcount.
You would add probably another 3 months of training after the academy. You have to go to FTO training as well, so that extends the time before they're actually put into fill a vacant spot in patrol.
And Chief, I think it's helpful for the group. Darien is still a desirable place for police officers to work at, right? We're still, like one of the things with Chief, sorry to cut you off for a second. Sorry, with Chief, what Chief Anderson was always talking about, we would be a desirable place, but then kind of things, every time we seem to have gotten in that low 50 number, even to that 52 max, 53, we'd kind of lose somebody, but it was kind of easy to poach, if I want to say that word, from somewhere else. But it's that long training time, right, that kind of sits there that you were just talking about, Captain, right?
I mean, I'd start by saying that I'm in my 30th year here, and we've been at full staff over those 30 years for about 16 hours. And there's always something, whether someone's out sick or someone's retiring or someone's resigning, taking another line of work. But to answer your question specifically is, our agency, more than any other agency, and due to the support of the board, the police commission, other town boards, we feel very well supported. We know we're supported. We don't ask for what we don't need, And I think that's been clear over the years. I've only been involved in this process for the last several years, but I make sure I extend that to our prospective candidates. And I think the captain will agree with me that we've had, maybe even our last 5 new hires have had to decide between agencies, and they've chosen the town of Darien because of the benefits package, the way the town's run, the way the agency is run, and what there is to offer for them. I mean, right up until today, we have a candidate that withdrew from 2 other processes because they're favoring Darien just because of all that you mentioned. So.
And Chief, how many, about 40% are laterals, would you say? From other agencies?
Yeah, that's
your
another
point,
great
right?
point.
More so in the last several years, too.
Yeah,
We picked up a lot of officers.
The last I
from
checked,
other agencies.
38% of our sworn staff have come from other departments. So that means they were officers in other departments, and for whatever the reasons are, they've decided to come here. Our retention rate is very high. Recruitment's a problem all over the country, and Connecticut's not insulated to that. But we do our best, and I think we have the luxury of hiring 1 or 2 at a time. Places like Stamford, Norwalk, Bridgeport are looking to hire by the dozens, and we can afford to be picky, so to speak, and we're getting good candidates, and I haven't seen a drop in that. I mean, I've seen a drop on a national level, but as far as the town of Darien is concerned, I think we're still in good shape, and that's thanks to you all.
So, when I think about the overall officer count, there's sort of 3 different forces that I've seen. One was, all else being equal, the introduction of the civilian dispatch was supposed to allow us to kind of have a little bit more officers, if you will, like out on the street, on the beat, and so forth. And I know even on the civilian dispatch, we haven't always been at 100% sort of staffing levels in terms of what our optimum one is there. And then the other one, the school resource officer is included in that 53 targeted budgeted amount. And so when we went from a few years ago having just an SRO at the high school, and now we have one at the high school and the middle school, that is, while it's included in your head count, that couple $100,000 worth of expense is actually supporting the Board of Ed, so it's less sort of officers on the street. Maybe could you talk a little bit about how the civilian dispatch program is going and how staffing and retirement is, or in hiring or working on that?
Yeah, that's dates back to 2014. Dwayne Lavello, the chief at the time, got that started. But we're currently, right, it's supposed to be 9 dispatchers total. So that's a number that we're trying to achieve here. Currently, we have 6. We did have a resignation, so we're up to 7 a few months back, but we're currently at 6 right now. It has been quite challenging over the last couple of years. We have hired several dispatchers, but unfortunately, they haven't successfully passed the training element of it. So we had to part ways with them, but it is still ongoing. We are, in fact, I believe, there's going to be a new contract coming up, so we're going to be putting out a hiring announcement. So we're hoping that the new contract might attract more candidates.
One other thing that I'll add is, when this program began, there was kind of an idea of it was going to be a 1-for-1. It was relieving an officer from the desk, putting a civilian dispatcher, and that gave you an officer just to do whatever. 10, 15 years have gone by, our jobs are significantly different, and it wasn't by our choice. There's state mandates in place, there's accreditation standards that we need to adhere to. We need to put our people in other places. It's not just because that officer came off the desk and working communications that they're on the road and they're satisfying minimum manpower now. We have, I couldn't even name them for you right now, the different roles and responsibilities that our people are tasked with now. I call the administrative lieutenant, that's a 10, 12, 15-year position. That's the junk drawer of the police department. When we get tasked with the state, you have to do this now, you have to respond to this, or you have to produce this report by April 1st, that goes to the administrative lieutenant, just because we don't know what to do with it at this point. And I don't think it's through any fault of our own, it's just they're giving us more to do. One of the examples I've used is they've changed the accident reporting forms, where it used to be a 2-page report. Now if you get a 2-car accident, that has 2 people in each car, that could be an 11, 12, 13-page report that the officer's got to do, and it takes them off the road for that amount of time. So.
And the supervisor needs to check that report afterwards for accuracy. In addition to what the chief was saying, so the admin lieutenant, you mentioned before, Jim, correctly, so 2 new SROs, right, which we effectively didn't replace over the years. We have a new admin lieutenant position. We also did we have a new sergeant position that we implemented, was about a year and a half ago, right? The Marine Division now is full-time, 7 days a week, as opposed to historically it was a little bit less than that. So there's a lot of positions that, we just asked for these 2 new officers over the last 2 fiscal calendar years, but prior to that, we haven't had any new patrol officers for 40 years, I think, at least 40 years here. So now with, the population growth, new developments in town, the police are first responders, right? We have Post 53, which is excellent, but the police are first responders, have to go to every single incident before anybody else. So, and you can see that on our website, all the calls that we have.
Along those lines, I might have told this story before, but Chief Anderson had said this in one of our meetings, and Brent, you may remember this. Los Angeles, so if you get a body cam video and you have to process it for whatever it is, right? Potentially a lawsuit or what. And if you have children involved, you have to kind of black them out. The city of Los Angeles has 200 people alone that do that. Just that one aspect of the job.
They're a lot busier than we are.
I know, but
How many did you get yesterday?
We get quite a few, and I'm the lucky one who has to, sift through all that, redact sensitive information. And what you were saying, like as far as dash cam, you also got to account for body camera. And if you got multiple officers on scene, that's multiple videos that I have to sit down and watch second for second. So it is extremely time consuming, and there has been an increase in FOIA requests over the past several years. So it takes a lot of man hours to handle that responsibility.
I didn't have anything else on patrol unless, Jim, you did, or if any board members have. If not, I'm going to jump to station operations, because that's our other big variance. And you guys will see when the wheel of death stops here.
Oh.
Hey, John.
While you're doing that, in capital, or are we here now? Okay.
We're here. Station operations, the large number you'll see, so an overall increase of 129. A bulk of that, as you guys can see, $105,000 is the new facility coordinator that we put in place that has come to this board and we approved. You'll see what you're saying there is a full year effect of that. So of the 129 increase, 105 of it is that. Then you got a little bit of facility repair and maintenance for 12 and some other smaller increases.
It's also an extra half year for the resource that they're sharing. Is it that they're sharing with Public Works?
This one is 100% funded in
It's in the Public Works budget.
100%
That's
of
the police budget, and the mechanic is 100%
Yeah, it's
funded
100%
in the
Public
DPW.
Works.
Sorry about that.
No, all good. So those are the
And the mechanic salary as well as animal control officers down slightly as well.
Yep.
Yep.
So these are the 2 biggest drivers of the increase in the police. Questions, comments? If not, I'm going to jump to capital real quick. 2 major items here, police vehicles, which were, as everybody knows, we're on a 3-year rolling program with that. $274,000. Jen confirmed me tonight, that's 4 different new cars on that one. And then a question, so we have $69,000 here for AC replacement IT server room. Brent or Chief or Captain, give a little background on that maybe, and then I have just a follow-up. The new coordinator, did they kind of sign off on this, or have they looked at that, or was that something that predated that person?
I've consulted with the facility coordinator regarding replacing this unit, and she's 100% on board. It would be, we want to be more proactive in replacing equipment. As you know, history shows that we've been a bit reactive, and really not to our fault or DPW. It's just the amount of responsibilities they have to do, so it's difficult for them to keep up with the demands of our building. But to give you a little background on the server rooms, some of you may recall last year, the 911 server room went down, and we had to get emergency repairs. So we have another server unit, which is our IT, which is just as critical as 911. It's the same type of unit. So again, if the lifespan is pretty much nearing the end, we want to get on top of it and replace that before we run into some major unforeseen issues.
And the IT cleaner, how long has she been on the job now?
She actually started this month, so
this month.
it's been a couple weeks.
Okay, great. Good to
I
find.
just want to add too about the server rooms. Some of this is state mandated. It's not by our choice to have these housed in our facility. So when there's a requirement to update ACs or fire suppression, that's somewhat out of our control. And I think what we're looking to do moving forward is take the approach of have a better idea of when those things need to be replaced or serviced so it doesn't reach that end-of-life status so that we're stuck with a huge unexpected expense.
Yeah,
How
Chief.
old is the AC unit?
About, probably run the renovations, I mean, it's at least 10 years. But it runs 24/7.
Yeah.
It has to be on all the time, so it takes a beating over the years. And if the one in our 911 room, we had some serious issues with that, again, it's likely that at some point it's going to happen to the IT room, and we can't afford for that to go down. It's going to really, really mess up department operations.
I think if this board remembers, when we talked about this position, the thought would be, I'm just kind of expanding upon, Chief, what you just said, is trying to take a more of a holistic view of what we have as kind of equipment and a maintenance program for it, right? Let's be proactive a little bit rather than reactive, right? To me, it made sense when we approved it, I'm going to say 4 months ago when it was? I forgot when it is now. Time's a
More than that, it was back in October, I think, but with a estimated start date of January 1st.
Okay. So I think we're still in that, what we thought we approved is still very much what that position is at this point. So good luck to her. Hopefully it works out.
Thank you.
I don't have anything else for police. Jim, unless you had any other comments or?
No, I guess just one comment was, there's always, just for the public to know that a lot of the overtime that the officers do earn and is reported is ultimately not just paid by the town, if you will, that's for services work. AT&T, other entities where they effectively reimburse the officers directly, but when you see the salary numbers, that's all counted in their ultimate salary. So a lot of that is not necessarily town-related work.
That's a good point. Any other questions?
And that revenue from that ultimately makes its way back in the general fund.
No, that's actually all run through a special fund. So the overtime and salaries that you see in here are strictly for general police work. The private duty has its own fund that handles the expenses and the revenues.
But what is the net revenue out of that?
It's minimal.
So, yeah.
What is it, 12% overhead? There's a percentage overhead allocation, and we also charge back to the general fund for vehicles.
Yes.
Yeah, we charge an admin fee when you see an officer on the side of the road, as well as what Jen said, right, for the vehicle as well. I think historically, I don't know, maybe it was like 80,000 over the last couple of years. I don't know, something like that.
roughly.
Yeah. So we generate revenue for the finance.
But Mr. Chairman, to your point, what they see our salaries look like in the newspapers
Yes.
are not
Yeah,
the
that's
perspective there,
inclusive of the
perception
money.
there is, right.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions on police?
Before we go, I'll echo what the chief said. Appreciate your support, Jen. Thanks for everything. And also to the RTM and First Selectmen. Appreciate everything that you guys do. Most importantly, I want to thank these guys. They really, starts from the chief down and the captain, really run a very well-run department. Very safe neighborhood that we live in, but there's a lot more that goes on here than you may see day to day. So thank you guys as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Why don't we, I think it's a relatively short conversation, but we'll talk about post.
if you're following along, it's called Other Emergency Services. There's two different accounts. One is emergency management, and this account is up 3%. And it's fine, it just plugs along. So there's nothing substantial that changes in this account. Personnel, materials, we share, the assistant fire marshal fulfills the role of the emergency management director. And there's no capital for 25, 26. Radios are in the future, and they're very expensive. So that's years down the road. So this is nothing much to talk about, in my opinion. And then EMS is not really post 53. This is funding the paramedic in town, who's actually an adjunct to post 53. So no money actually goes to post 53. This account, there's really only two pieces that are big expenditures. One is the actual paramedic, and that amount is trending down because there's higher call volume. That means that the paramedics are going on more calls, so there's more billing generated. Post 53 doesn't generate any bills for basic life support calls. Those are all free, but if a paramedic goes, it is billed. And then the town is basically the town guarantees Stamford EMS a contract, and so the billings offset what we owe. So the calls have been going up, so what we're paying is going down. So that's a savings in that account. And the only other big expenditures in this account are for communications. Yes. Is that right? Or is that yeah, that's in this one.
Yeah, for CMED
So
dispatching.
there's the communication with the hospital, which is one piece, and then there's the actual dispatch piece. And those numbers come from CMED in Bridgeport. Capital, there is nothing for next year. The paramedic vehicle was just replaced. Basically, in this account, moving forward, there's just going to be a vehicle replacement cycle. And there's a defibrillator that the paramedic uses, which is very expensive. So that has to be replaced periodically, but not next year.
So that's outside of the contract. The contract's just for the person.
Yes.
I know we've had donations of vehicles.
That's to Post.
Okay, so this is different.
Post, by the way, funds all their own vehicles.
Okay.
So they get
That's what I'm wondering.
donations for all the ambulances and all the fly cars. So it's just the paramedic is so far what the town has been on the hook for.
And it's really only about 20% of the paramedic.
That's incredible.
Yes.
Jen, do we remember when we went full-time on the paramedic? That's been at least, that was pre-COVID, right?
17?
Yes.
Does that sound right?
Sounds right. Right, 8 or 9 years now, 7 or 8 years? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Man, it's crazy.
So any other questions on that? Okay, so next are the fire departments.
This was me, Jenny, and Jim. There's really not a lot to talk about with respect to the three fire department operating budgets. The major increase is in the Darien Fire Department, which is, if you can see, is that even with the increase, which is a $29,000 or 15% increase, it's $216,700, $100,000, excuse me. It's still, $15,000, $20,000 below in operating expenses the other two departments. The main driver of that $29,000 is an $11,000 increase in facility repair and maintenance, which is consistent with historical, a $6,000 increase in telecom expense, consistent with other departments, and a $3,500 increase in EMR training. So again, not much to really go through on the DFD. The Noroton Fire Department's up 5% to $234,000, $5,600 increase in gas meter subscription, and a $3,800 increase in facility repair and maintenance. And the Noroton Heights Fire Department is up $4,000 or 1.8%, and that's an increase in their facilities repair and maintenance budget. So unless there are any, I guess I can cover capital on those three departments now before we move to Fire Marshal and Fire Commission. Okay, the Darien Fire Department has a approximately $350,000 capital budget. 5,000 small cap, 30,000 radio systems in trucks, 150,000 to replace a boiler, which is 20 plus years old, and it was when it was acquired, it was secondhand. The 30,000 truck radios, that's 3 trucks, 10,000 per truck. There's a dryer. They're adding a second dryer for turnout gear at 10,000. These things take a long time to dry, so this will obviously double their capacity to dry this turnout gear. And there's $152,000 to replace the roof. It's leaking. Its roof was last replaced over 25 years ago, and they have a quote from October of 2024 that includes a 30% cushion.
Okay.
That's the DFD capital. Any questions? Okay, the Noroton Fire Department capital account is $90,000 approximately, $6,500 for water rescue suits. This is to bring the total to, this is for 4, which is the second phase of 2. $5,500 to replace tires, 5,000 small cap, $50,000 to clean and paint the room, the truck room. It was last painted in 1984, and this is more than cosmetic. It's because all the soot from the trucks resides within the walls. This is to remove all that, which is obviously a health issue. And then to add 3 thermal imaging cameras is $23,000. Let's see, newer technology, I think, I'm reading here, trying to read my handwriting, 2011 and 2015 sounds like the last time they were replaced. Is that accurate, Jenny? Jen?
Yep, 2 2011 and 1 2015.
Yes, and one has failed, is what I have a note.
Yep.
Dan, is that when they arrive at a fire and they're kind of looking at a house? Like, how's that work? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, they can see hot spots, they can scan it and know.
Potentially get people in.
Yeah.
I think each department has those, right?
Yes.
If there are no other questions on the Noroton Fire Department capital, I'll move to the Noroton Heights Fire Department capital. 5,000 small cap, 70,000 airbag replacement. These are to lift vehicles, so this goes out and you use an airbag to lift a vehicle to extract a person, whatever. And this was last replaced 15 years ago. And there remains in the spreadsheet, but I think it has been deferred, $150,000 to investigate or hire a consultant for volunteer housing. How should we think about with respect to this capital budget, Jen?
So it is not currently proposed to be funded in fiscal 26 by the Board of Selectmen. They
Right.
deferred it to fiscal 27.
Right.
Some of that was some renovations that this particular department needed, but then also looking at volunteer housing and that sort of thing. We've talked about it, and this can, the $150,000 can come out of the capital plan because that's something that the Fire Commission we think can look into, come up with their recommendations based on what they know about the climate for that kind of thing, the departments, what their needs are, and rather than spending outside money, have the Fire Commission do that.
Thank you. All right, still on the fire ops page, the next item is the Fire Commission. Their budget is at 108, or excuse me, 394,000, up 108,000. Driving that, if you, it's a new fire administrator, which would add $90,000 to the budget. This fire administrator would manage bids, purchase orders, invoices, coordinate reporting requirements across all 3 departments. These functions are currently being performed, I think, principally by the chiefs and maybe people within their departments. I'm not clear whether any of it's currently being performed within the fire marshal's office, but and there's another new FTE proposed in the fire marshal's budget of a deputy fire marshal, because the number of inspections across the developments is going up. 4 years ago, we were at, I think, 0 deputy fire marshals, and we added 1 and then brought it to 2. This would bring it to 3. And then I've seen a reference to either fiscal 27 or fiscal 28, we would go to 4. There are metrics that support that, and I'm generally supportive of the deputy fire marshal addition. I'm struggling a little bit with the fire administrator position because I understand the need. We have growing requirements for the deputy fire marshal, the number of inspections and everything else those positions do. This one is really more about consolidating work that's being done already. I understand the benefit of that. I'm struggling with the cost of that. So, Jim or Jenny, do you want to hop in here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this was designed, and I'm not sure, John, if you want to give some more color on this, but this is designed to facilitate and help the fire commission in terms of tracking training, purchasing, and trying to coordinate other things that are, you know, not necessarily fully coordinated across the 3 different departments.
And it's a $90,000 this year, but that's a half. It's $150,000 full run rate. Is
No,
that?
the fire administrator is budgeted at a full year, and the deputy fire marshal is
So 90
budgeted
is
at
the
half
full.
year.
The 90 is the full year.
Yep.
But 90 is just the salary, right? That doesn't
Correct.
include benefits.
I'm sorry, the 150 is fully loaded.
Yes.
Sorry, that's right. I missed it.
Yeah, I guess I'd say the following. So Dan's right, this is really about consolidating work that's being done currently. This is work that's not been done efficiently, and I'd actually take a step back and say, one of the things that we're trying to do in terms of helping the fire services generally, so this would be not just the 3 departments, but the fire commission as well, is to bring this to regular order, I guess is probably the right way to describe it. So currently, if you think about all of our boards and commissions around town, these are either elected boards or they're appointed boards by the Board of Selectmen. Each one has a specific mission and charter, and each one has specific responsibilities. Today, the Fire Commission is not like that. These are all sort of self-appointed. It's all run exclusively by the fire departments. They do a great job, and we're really grateful to the individuals who both volunteer for our 3 fire departments, but also volunteer for the Fire Commission itself. But the Fire Commission is not something where you have regular minutes or regular agendas. They're not televised. It's not open to the public. It doesn't have the same standing that our other appointed boards and commissions have. So part of my process this year is to bring that into regular order. So we'll come up with a proposal that says, this is how we'll run the Fire Commission going forward. These will potentially be standing members, e.g. the chiefs of the individual departments, and these would be the members that would be appointed by the Board of Selectmen. In addition, the commission would have a specific set of responsibilities. First and foremost would be, for example, the fire apparatus vehicle or apparatus replacement schedule, which is getting more complicated because of the lead time on ordering some of these vehicles. And so getting that, to use the word professionalized, I think should be a goal of the town. But further to the administrative work, it's not just the fire commission, but it's actually all 3 departments. So if you look at behind the scenes, how difficult it is for us as a town to kind of manage and sort through that. Again, I'm not saying that these guys don't do a great job, they do, but it's very hard to get all of this on a consistent basis, to have reports where we can monitor expenditures and be clear about that. to have confidence that all the payables are being managed right. And this is all true by their own admission, right? These are volunteer firefighters. They are not accountants, they're not budgeteers, they're not administrators. And further to that, there's some things that we don't do well at all. So for example, capturing training data, which then feeds into our applications for insurance. We don't have a good way to track all that right now, and we're actually leaving money on the table simply because we can't keep the records fresh and current that we submit to our insurance companies for purposes of pricing insurance for the town. And so the idea behind this is to try to do these two things at once, which is regularize, to use the word, the fire commission itself, and then to create a support role that would not only support the commission, but all three departments on the list of things that Jennifer just described. We have budgeted this to be full-time right now. If you talk to members of the commission, they actually think as a start it would be part-time. And I think that's probably true. One conversation that we had with Mark McEwen is that it's the emergency, what's the role he wants?
Assistant Emergency Management Director.
Assistant Emergency Management Director. He's been looking for that for a while. A proposal he had to me was, well, maybe what we could do is find someone who could do both those jobs. So part-time fire coordinator or administrator, and then part-time emergency services director, and try to make that a single role. It would be full-time, but would cover both those functions. The last thing I'd say about the coordinator is we're trying to create something that has a little bit of hierarchy to it, because I want, and Jennifer and I have talked about this and we're on the same page, was we want that person to report to the town administrator, and the value of that is she decides compensation, performance, and all of that is decided by the town administrator, and Jennifer can specify all the things that she needs for her paperwork purposes. I want it done this way, it needs to have this content, it's got to be organized in this fashion. But on a day-to-day basis, they spend time with the departments and the commission and says, okay, if the commission needs materials for one of their meetings, or a department needs some particular assistance, that person works for them too and follows their direction. So it's not just a friend, it's not a family member, it's none of that. It's somebody that comes in and does the job, and if they don't do it, well, we make a change. But there's a hierarchy there that says that person has to report to these two groups. So, I mean, none of us like to hire people, but I think if we're going to take the fire function, if you will, or departments to the next level, both the commission and the departments themselves, having a coordinator role like this is going to make a big difference in helping us professionalize really every aspect of the administration of all those entities.
So I have a question. In the fire marshal's budget, there are proposed to be 6.6 FTEs pro forma for the deputy fire marshal that is proposed as part of this budget. Let's see, 1.5, 2.6, 3.6 of those FTEs are not deputy fire marshals, okay, currently. So one is a fire marshal, another's an assistant fire marshal, another's a part-time professional, and another is admin clerical. The fire marshal's a 1.0 FTE, but the assistant fire marshal is 0.5, and the part-time professionals total 1.1, 2 FTEs, total 1.1. Is there any reason why the work that you are proposing, which I think is constructive for the town, can't be allocated to people that are already on the payroll, that are on the payroll on a part-time basis? We're already paying them benefits. They're already been onboarded. We could just give them more work and maybe move a current part-time position to a full-time position.
That's a great question. My short answer is no. The reason for that is severalfold. First is that it gets back to my hierarchy point before, which is having a resource that's responsive to the town administrator, the commission, and those three departments as a primary responsibility, right? Because the commission and the departments have a lot of real work that needs to be done and coordinated closely and done in a way that's consistent with the direction they provide. It's further complicated by the fact that the town administrator is going to have specific requirements for how that work needs to be done. And to give that to a group of individuals, all of whom have primary responsibilities that really are ahead in line of this type of administrative function, I think sub-optimizes that in a way that wouldn't be helpful. I'd say further, it sub-optimizes it so much that I'd rather actually just keep doing it the way we're doing it than try to introduce that work with that group.
To clarify, I'm not suggesting that we give it to multiple people. I'm suggesting that there are multiple people within the fire marshal's office that are part-time.
Remember
And
this.
could we take one of them and turn them into full-time by adding these responsibilities? And that person would obviously still be in the fire marshal's office, would then become the main liaison for Jen as to these matters.
Just a point of clarification, those two part-time positions are actually deputy fire marshals. One is dedicated as the blight officer, and the other one is a part-time inspector.
And your assistant fire marshal is half-time in the emergency
EMD.
management
Okay.
department.
Yeah.
So is what your proposal before that this position, the supervisor position, would also be another part-time working with Mark?
Well, so his proposal was, look, if you're going to hire somebody that is, for now, part-time, right, one of the things we're going to try to measure is, so to do all the things that we're talking about, all three departments, plus the commission, all the reporting the town administrator requires, to do all of that, we're going to try it and see if it's part-time. It's possible that that's a full-time role. It's a little bit uncharted territory because this person's going to do this work in a different way and hopefully in a better way. And my bet is that it's part-time, but let's see how it goes. Mark's proposal was that if it's in fact part-time, I have this assistant emergency management director role that I also need to fill that's been unfilled for a while. Maybe we could marry those two. That's theoretical at this point. We actually don't know if there's somebody who has both the qualifications and the professional interest to do both those types of jobs. I don't know. As to the suggestion that maybe we say, all right, let's set aside the emergency management director position and maybe pair one of these part-time assistant or deputy fire marshals with the fire coordinator, that's possible. But again, one of the challenges that you have here is that it's a different hierarchical role. Right, we're trying to create an administrator that is genuinely a support function for both the town administrator and these fire entities. And whereas a deputy fire marshal sits in the fire marshal's office, and if you work with all these guys, it's all kind of the same hierarchy. I really want somebody to come in and do this work, and if they don't do it to the satisfaction of the town administrator and the fire departments, we terminate that person and get somebody who will. So I think the hierarchy and having somebody that is there on the spot, ready to respond and get you exactly what you need. That's the look and feel of this role that we're trying to create. I don't know that creating one where they're all essentially friends and peers has the same benefit. And again, rather than do something like that, I think it would be better actually to stick with the status quo.
Do you think this type of role, is this like an ex-chief?
No.
Is this more of an administrative?
This is a younger person. I mean, not to be age discriminatory, that's bad, but this is somebody who wasn't somebody who was senior before, where it was, I think that we wouldn't want that. We need somebody who's quick with Excel, who takes direction, who will help us advance the state of this, because if you think about it, I mean, I've got a view, and the town administrator's got a view about how this should be done, but figuring out a way to get it done. We don't do a great job of it right now. And you want somebody to come in and say, all right, chief of this department, let's sit down and talk about this. I'll help you actually do this better. Tell me all the things you're trying to do and what's a problem, and I'm going to go figure this out and say, okay, sir, here's what this is. Does this look okay? We're trying to create that type of hierarchy so that these guys have got a support resource for them. You don't need a former chief to come in and say, yeah, I'll get to it when I want to. And how does this Excel thing work? No. I don't think that works.
Yeah.
And does this take over, Jen, some of the billing role? I know that didn't we transfer a bunch of the fire department, like bills, in terms of being sent directly to the town?
Right now, the way we have it structured, they would still send their invoices over to us to pay. We've been paying on their behalf for 6-7 years probably for a lot of the things. What it would help with is making sure that when they come over to us, they are coded properly, they're timely. With the chiefs and the treasurers being volunteers and having jobs outside of that role, a lot of times it's difficult for them to get to that. And so we get invoices that are pretty old, or they just have a hard time getting them over here, dropping them off, that sort of thing. So the coordinator would help them understand, that they can give the bills to the coordinator, and the coordinator can code them to the vendor number, the account number, bring them over here because they're working during normal business hours. They can circulate amongst the departments and do that same role on each one. So I think it would be more consistent processing of their invoices, more timely processing of their invoices. They have some variation when we want to pay for the same thing for each of the departments, the same types of expenses, but some submit their bills for these things and some don't. And then at the end of the year, they go, oh, here's the year's worth. So we want to make that just more timely, streamlined, and just more efficient. And this would help with that.
I'd like to see if there's cost savings for like ordering in like bulk.
That's the other thing that we've talked about, too.
Standardization and things like that.
Because they see that each of the three are ordering something, and they say, why don't we just order in bulk? Maybe we can keep it up at the drill tower, and the departments can come and get what they need. So there's that advantage as well.
Yeah, and you'd also want somebody to Jennifer's point, you also kind of want somebody who comes in and will take direction from the town administrator, says, okay, this is how I want this done, this is the timing, this is the way it's coded, go do that. Yes, ma'am, I'll go do all that. And then to go to the department and say, yes, I'm going to work with you to get all of that done. So you've got, again, somebody really focused on trying to do this right and set up systems and processes. You don't want a senior person, you don't want a retired person, you don't want an ex-chief, you don't want somebody's buddy, you don't want a family member, you don't want any of that. You want somebody to come in and play that kind of role. And I think when you have that, it's going to help pull all this together in I think, in a really efficient way.
Does the fire commission support this?
Yes. In fact, one of the things that we're trying to do is both on the fire coordinator role, but actually the reshaping of the commission itself, is I'm using this extended period to work with the commission so that this comes from them as well. So Jennifer, Susan, and I have already worked out a job description for the fire coordinator. We sent that to the fire commission. I said, I want you guys to come in and put your thinking on that and tell me what you think. And so their deliverable for the next fire commission meeting in April is to come to me with both their suggestions on the role that Jennifer and Susan and I have created in terms of what they would change, but also I want specific suggestions on the commission itself with regard to not just its structure, but things that are pretty important that I want the commission to take over, which is the vehicle replacement schedule. So I think by doing that in a bottom-up way, all the commissioners, all the department chiefs, all of them come and say, we're supportive of this too, we're going to work with this person, and we're all together on this. And so part of it's not just dictating from me or from Jennifer, this is getting their input as well, and everybody comes to agreement at the same time.
And this individual, we don't need to provide an automobile?
No.
No.
And it wouldn't
if they have enough travel around town, we do it on a mileage reimbursement basis and not provide it.
And the individual would not be part of a collective bargaining group?
As this is written, no, they would not be.
Would it be feasible to authorize this on a part-time basis? And what would the budget impact on making this part-time versus full-time, both on the 90 and the 150? And then if you either believe you can't hire somebody on a part-time basis versus a full-time basis, or you learn after this person would be onboarded that it's becoming a full-time position, then we would be open to having that dialogue. But how would you react to that as moving forward on a part-time basis versus full-time?
If you talk to the commission, their initial view is maybe this is part-time to start. We kind of don't know. I mean, not to speak for you, but I'd be okay with that. We'd give it a go and see what part-time looks like, and if we need something more, we'd come back and say, we need an appropriation, this needs to be a full-time job.
I do have one thing to add. So in the emergency management budget, they had put in for a part-time deputy emergency director, which got pulled out because this position was there. So I'm not arguing it should be full.
Well, just to clarify that, so.
It's not in there, right?
What's in there now?
The way the budget is structured right now is that assistant EMD, which now we're exploring the idea of marrying it with the fire coordinator, but in the budget, the assistant EMD role is covered by 20% of a deputy fire marshal. So the role is covered, but if it wasn't being done by a deputy fire marshal because maybe we go this route, There is plenty of inspection work to keep the deputy fire marshal busy.
But
So that
you're
could
not
be-
suggesting,
So it's not a consideration then?
you're not suggesting that if we did make this a full-time role and took the emergency management function with it, that we wouldn't need the new deputy fire marshal?
We would still need it.
We would still need it?
Yeah.
This isn't a person,
So it's not-
this is a more administrative,
Yeah.
financial management position, not a fire inspector, right?
So I'm much
Not
more...
not at all an inspector role, correct.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm more comfortable with this, and we just see what the numbers look like with that adjustment. I'm assuming it's not just cut it in half. So, okay.
Well, this comes without benefits and all that. so
Yeah,
we
that's
pick
going to make a
some-
big difference.
Okay.
Some number, yeah, 45.
And therefore, it'll be more difficult to place, but maybe not.
Ostensibly, but you'd be surprised the number of people in town
Okay.
that could look for part-time work like this and make it work, so.
Great.
That would be my concern, is an administrative operations person managing 3 departments, and whether that is 30 hours or 40 hours, I wonder if you'll find candidates at the part-time level. That was my concern. And you had mentioned, Dan, before about looking at other part-time positions and seeing if we could combine. I just wanted to say, I think there's an issue of skill set, right? It's trying to piece together a couple
Okay.
different part-time people with
That's a fair
competing
point.
skill sets. I think you want a very specific skill set here.
Yeah, I think kind of half of this job I have very clear in my mind, and I think Jennifer as well.
Does it free up
Half-
time for you?
What's that?
It frees up time for
For the future finance director.
the future,
Yes.
yeah, right,
A
right.
lot of time there.
Right.
But for the town administrator as well, because
Right.
otherwise, the chiefs, from an administrative role, you kind of have 3 different people coming to you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, but now, what would happen is the chiefs would not come to this. The chiefs would work with this person, prepare the
Right.
budgets, and this person would
Right.
represent all of it. Commission, departments, fire replacement, capital,
noise
all of
gets
that.
filtered here.
That single person would represent that to us and to you guys,
So John, this is a person like you would envision would go to the monthly fire commission meetings?
everyone. Yep.
As part
And it
of-
would be their administrative resource for those meetings, yes.
As part of the normalization of this commission, I know it's been floated, and I apologize if I missed it, to add additional members that are not part of the fire departments, right?
I haven't sorted that out yet.
Because that would normalize it in line with others, and then perhaps they could help and they would be volunteers,
They could help with what?
this job. I mean, it's being done right now
Well,
by the
it would be like
commissioners.
you guys doing the administrative work for the finance director, right? We're trying to create something that's consistent with other boards, right? Which is, they're the volunteers who are elected or appointed to that board, and then there's an administrative resource that does minutes and agendas and materials and keeps track of all of that, does the budgets and all of that, consistent with the board's direction. It wouldn't be that there'd be an administrative person on the board who would be volunteering for that. That's no different than what we have today.
I mean, if the commissioners are doing this work today, and we added 3 more people that were volunteers that had some knowledge, obviously we'd be selecting them because they had some knowledge of the business. I mean, you look at the police commissioners, I think they do a lot of strategic work. I'd like to see that happen, right? That we would normalize the commissions, that it included outsiders, and also that they would potentially do some of that work or take some of that off.
Strategic stuff, yes. Thinking about our vehicle schedule strategy, yes, absolutely, they would be doing that. Are they going to be doing the administrative stuff to make sure that the training's documented for our insurance submissions? No. That's what I'm talking about. That's a completely separate role.
It sounds like it's more equivalent to like the administrative officer in the police department.
Yes.
But currently being done. It's not like the work's
It's
not
not,
being
but
done
no, some of it's not being done.
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Well, but
Well, it's being done by 3 different
Well,
departments.
Mylene
but
raises
not-
the second piece to this, which for me is a little bit of an unknown. I kind of don't know what I don't know about what all is out there, right? I kind of want this person, when there's not something going on right at that moment, to spend time, for example, with paid fire departments. So how are they managing all of this? And to ask questions about what the best practice is for documentation tracking, organizing so that we know when our equipment or uniforms has to be replaced, and have come up with a better schedule so that maybe if we're replacing on this timeline, you can actually increase that by 50% if you do the following. Right? There are opportunities to get a lot better handle on things like that that could save us I mean, not enough money to cover this role, but a good amount of money just to make sure that when we come in and say, oh, X needs to be done for the fire departments, not to worry, I've compared this with how other departments do it. We are right at the edge in terms of really maximizing the usefulness schedule, say, for some of this equipment and how to think about that, and come to us with recommendations about, well, when you hear that we might need to replace something, here's the best way to think about it, and I've compared this with 8 other departments. And nobody who's going to be on a volunteer basis is going to be on top of that type of thing, and that's what we want to create with this role. If that piece that's kind of undefined gets a lot more intensive, that's something that could create a full-time role, but I don't know what that is right now, and so that's why I'm okay, to Dan's point, about setting this up as part-time, and if we get something that's meaty and substantive there, we'll come back.
One thing that I would add too is, one thing that I envision with this position is getting some continuity in the way things are run, because right now, the chief turns over every year or two, and so we're kind of at the mercy. Some have been fantastic administratively, others that is not their forte. And getting them up to speed on what's our transfer process, what's our AP process, what's the budget process, what's the purchasing process, the bidding process. It's a constant cycle of training somebody new on that in each department when the chief changes. And you might get someone who really gets it, or you might have someone who struggles with it and they just can't grasp it. So it's constant hand-holding or reminders and bordering on nagging. So having somebody on staff that would stay longer than what the chief's turnover would be really beneficial.
One other thing I wanted to add about this is that I do think it's useful to remember that Darien is the only town in Lower Fairfield County that has an all-volunteer fire force, the only one. And even since I was on this board, one of the most important things was what could we do as a town collectively to continue to encourage that and do everything we can to encourage our volunteers. Not give away the store, but make sure that this is a positive volunteer experience for those folks. 909 times out of 1,000, these are people who want to fight fires, be at firehouses, be in fire trucks, do training, and make sure that the people that we serve are protected from fires. They certainly don't want to listen to me about budgets or reports, and I'm pretty sure they don't want to listen to Jennifer either. So if we could take that piece out of the fire volunteer experience, I think at the margin, this improves the volunteer experience for those individuals, because they're not having to sit there for several hours in a budget meeting or get berated because something was not handled correctly in terms of coding or some other administrative aspect, and they get back to what they volunteered to do. This position will pull that out of the volunteer fire experience. I think that's good for all 3 departments and the commission.
It's interesting to hear you talk about like the role and the work that they need to do. It almost seems like I'd go the opposite way. In the beginning, it feels like it could be a full-time job in terms of setting up these processes and kind of starting a bit from zero or getting organized. And then once these processes are in place, it feels like it's...
Yeah, I would think it'd be difficult, though, to take a full-time job and turn it into a part-time job.
Yeah.
Well,
once you've onboarded that individual.
A big part of the process is conception and execution. So if I think about how the process should be done, I mean, Jennifer's got a very good idea of exactly what needs to be done. We know what needs to be done. We just need somebody to come out and execute, right? So go set up the process so it looks like this. Don't show up in our office unless the paperwork looks like this, it's coded like that, the report is in this format. That person over time will help create those processes, but they don't need to figure it out, right? We kind of know what needs to be done.
Okay. Bless you, Paul.
I was told I have to come up here. From my perspective, this is about getting timely information and data, and that's sometimes more important than $3 that is saved. But if we're getting timely information on a whole set of things, training, what's being bought, bills coming in on a normal time, that allows proper decisions to be made in what the next step should be. So when John says, I don't know what I don't know, I think once we put somebody in there, we're going to find out a lot of things that we should know that we didn't. And for me, that's the key of this role. And potentially I always look whenever we're doing fires, we order like 4 different types of fire jackets to go in there, you know, what oxygen we're doing, because everybody has their own preference. You know, is there some consistency that we can start doing? And that's what this role can ultimately come down to help the fire departments as well as doing it. But to me, the key thing is having consistent, timely data and making sure, as you said, insurance, training, all that other things is being done, because you're right, they're here to fight fires. I one time told Chief Fanderson, I need him to be my best cop, not my best accountant. So.
What he said.
Okay, anything else on Fire Commission operating? All right, Fire Marshal. This is really 2 accounts that total about 1.2 million. Think of half of it as hydrants and mains. That's 556,000, up 48,000 or 9.5%. That's just pushed through by Aquarian. Is this? Will there be any variance? There will be a variance to this number. This is a educated.
There will. We get I'm surprised we haven't gotten it yet. We get a rate update in the spring.
Yep.
But that only covers through December anyway. But when we do get that, we can true up this number.
Okay.
But isn't it basically almost a formula in terms of the number of fire hydrants you have and the feet of line?
Yeah, linear feet of line.
The feet of line in the
It's just
town.
the
But
rate
it's the
per
rate,
that.
and sometimes there is, some years there's a credit, depends on what the.
I don't think we actually get
regulatory
charged
committee-
for the water. We usually get charged for the number of fire hydrants absent maybe the 1 that we own or 2 that we own.
Yep.
The balance of this budget is increase, let's see, is 100 and, wait, 1 second, is up $110,000 or not 20%. And that is principally the result of the aforementioned new deputy fire marshal, given the number of inspections, the increase in the number of inspections that has been driven by our development, presumably other mandated matters. So there's an analysis of the hours that have been dedicated to inspections and how that has increased over time and how that will continue to increase over time given the developments. So personally, I'm supportive of this position. And again, that is, I think that's $85,000 in this budget. I think it's about 144 all in is the number that I saw or heard. Any discussion on the position?
My only view on this, all of these inspections, I know there are inspections I think that need to take place as the building's being built.
After they're built, then if it's a multi-dwelling unit, they must inspect the units every year.
Yeah, and so I guess my only question is in terms of the inspections that need to take place while it's being built, is that a different type of skill set than those that just need to take place every
No,
year?
the same person would have the skill set to do both of those types of inspections.
Okay.
And then there's a $15,000 bump in software expense. And I'm looking at my notes as to why that is. Was that a mandated? I'm kind of remembering.
It's a new software that they're putting in, I think they're wrapping up putting it in. It was in the capital budget a year ago, I think.
That's really it on the expense side. There's a $30,000 of, let me just go back, of revenue, which is all anticipated fees for new retail space. So that's $30,000 increase, 20% increase from $150,000 to $180,000. That's it on the operating side for the fire marshal. On the capital side,
Vehicle.
okay. The fire commission, $300,000 to improve the drill ground training classroom, $39,000 for cleaning, for rotation turnout gear. This is the second round. And then $85,000 to expand the concrete pad at the drill tower site. Let's see. make sure I have all that.
Guys, I have a question on that. I thought,
Yes.
we approved the pad, if you will. I thought it was only like 6-7 months ago.
No, we did the foundation for the classroom. That's what we funded.
Yeah, I thought they figured out, like, this was how we need it to include both, like, the classroom and the wash.
This concrete pad is different than the classroom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they're not co-located.
Right, it's a separate where they do some training and I
Okay,
think they do
understood.
vehicle burns and that sort of.
There is 300 for the classroom.
Yeah, nothing was approved for the actual classroom, right?
We had it in ARPA, they couldn't get it all worked out in time, so we swapped some things out and said, let's run it through the capital process.
But to date, nothing's been approved for the classroom, right?
I think just the foundation.
Do you know what expenses were actually taken out of the budget and put into ARPA? In other words, so part of this is that this is showing up because some things we were going to spend money on were actually subsequently covered by ARPA.
Yeah,
So there is a swap in there. I can't remember what it was.
it was like the hoses and a bunch of other fire-related stuff that we would have had in the capital budget.
You
We
expedited
plopped
the
them.
year of the hoses.
Yeah, and there were a few other items, but we pulled them out of what would have been in 26 capital and put it into ARPA.
And the turnout gear, this is the second year to add 30 sets. 21 were done last year.
Right.
This is the last 9.
And that's for the new required.
Yeah, compliance with
payment.
state act.
Takes PFAS out of the, yeah.
That's it on the commission. On the fire marshal side, there's a vehicle replacement for $128,500. This is a 2016 vehicle with a 2004 trailer on it, so that would replace that. Then there's turnout gear of $6,000 for the fire marshal. And so that totals $135,000.
I have a question on the fire, all of the fire vehicle replacement schedule. Now that we know that these lead times are delayed, probably a couple years, did we modify the 6-year capital plan to sort of reflect the fact that we're going to have to ask a little earlier in order to get those trucks?
No, that hasn't been done yet. I think the
Okay.
reconfiguring of that plan is kind of related to the fire
Keep in
commission
mind
changes.
that the fire trucks are all COD, so one of the
Yeah.
things you can do is you can order these things, you don't have to pay for them for 3, 4, 5 years whenever they're ready. But that said, we should have a list that says, here's when we think we need to order the vehicle for
Back up.
delivery on this
Yes.
day.
Yeah.
And just have that kind of a well-oiled machine so that what would happen is that you'd approve this way in advance, and the appropriations that you would have in any particular to accommodate the delivery of a vehicle was set a long time ago. The one thing we just got to make sure of is that these manufacturers don't require an appropriation in advance of that. I don't think they do, but.
Well, for our purposes, we have to have an appropriation before we can enter into a contract. So if it's a 4-year lead time, we have to get the appropriation.
Right.
Before we order, but the cash won't go out until.
That's what I'm not worried about, but I want to make sure that,
Appropriation.
No.
Okay, so that's the important point. You do the appropriation, but it's not something that you would budget until it's actually delivered.
Sure.
But that amount would be set well in advance.
so I'm looking at a 27-28 vehicle replacement for $124,000. Is that something?
So
should
the
know.
fire marshal vehicles are just kind of normal vehicles.
That's
They're not
fine,
that
but
same type
let's
of
just
situation.
say a truck for $2 million, a fire truck for
Yep.
$2 million in 2 years. Should we
This
be
doesn't,
appropriating sooner than later in order to make sure, I'm just want to
yeah,
make
we
sure we
need
get
the,
our
we
trucks
need
on
the
the-
commission to go through and
Okay.
tell us what the order date should be for their replacement schedule. So
Okay.
that hasn't flowed all the way through them yet. So what you see here doesn't reflect
Okay.
the longer lead times.
Although I would say the tanker 45, which I think is at the top of this list, they do want to order that, right?
Yep.
All right, so that one you would order, we're not going to need an appropriation
Right.
for it until, we'll need an appropriation now, but you're not going to need to pay for
Pay
it
for it.
or bond for it
Right.
until we get closer to that delivery date. But by the end of the year, this is going to be rationalized so that you'll have a set of, you'll have a vehicle projection, they will have pressure tested all that, and you'll have both order and appropriation dates and then likely funding dates.
I expect that we'll be getting more requests for appropriations sooner than later.
Yep.
given these lead times. So.
And I'm just going to add, remember, if we appropriate and bond today, and it's not delivered to 4 years, depending upon where our general fund is, we're not going to be actually bonding for it typically until the 5th year.
We will bond it when we need the cash to pay
Right,
for it.
right.
So you could do a lot of appropriations down with no bonding requirements.
I just want to make sure we.
Yeah.
I think part of the difference, I remember a number of years ago, the fire manufacturers wouldn't actually do all the work with the fire departments to kind of go through all the painstaking process of designing and quoting and putting together a full contract until they show the appropriation. The last few fire trucks, they've pretty much had the contract done, and then we've been approving the actual number. So in terms of what we approve has always been effectively like, within a very small error term of what the final delivery was. Rolling back 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it was, those manufacturers weren't willing to necessarily do that deep dive into the contract without an appropriation.
Well, one of the advantages of getting more aggressive about this and signing contracts and getting appropriation in year 0 and taking delivery in year 4, hard to believe it's taking that long to make these vehicles, is that we can set the prices for that today, and we know what that number is going to be in 4 years when we actually pay for the vehicle.
Yeah, Jim, with what you were talking about, in fact, not only did we need a contract, they needed 25% of the money typically up front, and the other 75% when we got it, which was really 18 months, and sometimes on a long vehicle it would take 24, but that was all pre-COVID. We've seen it go now from 2 years to 3 years, and this last one being 4 years. So, I'm starting to think we may start seeing them 5 years out.
That's all I got.
Okay. I think that covers everything for tonight. So I think in terms of our next meeting is on next Tuesday. The largest item that we'll be focusing on is Board of Ed, and we'll go through that first. I think members of the Board of Ed, Dr. Adley, Rich, and others will be here. The other smaller things that we'll be going through are bonding and debt service, which we'll have a little bit better update in terms of where the markets are, but we won't have actually priced. I think
We
we're not
price
really
on the 8th, which
Yeah.
is the same day you vote.
Yeah. So we'll know the actual debt service, but we'll go through sort of that one. Investment earnings is the next one that we're going to go through. And then the only other one we're going to discuss is sort of Great Island, which is a relatively small appropriation, but there is specific detailed backup on that. We talk a little bit about the mechanics of how exactly that'll be appropriated. But that's our plan for next Tuesday. Next week we have 2 meetings, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday.
Thursday.
Sorry, one on Tuesday, one on Thursday. And on Thursday, we'll kind of begin to accumulate what changes we think we might want to make to any budgets. And we'll dive into, Jen, at that point, where the general fund is. Yep. We'll have a good idea. I think based on some numbers I got from you, Jen, you'll correct me, but it looks like on the Board of Selectmen side, there might be approximately 800,000 of a surplus, if I
think it's about 1.1.
On this year's budget, it's 1.1.
Yep.
Yeah. Does that include the additional investment earnings, or is that just?
No, that's just on the expenditure side.
Okay. So there's 1.1 there, there's whatever we estimate our final investment earnings to be, and then there's the Board of Ed right now. I think based on their report from like last week, they were showing about a $460,000 surplus. So between that 450, the 1.1 on the town side, whatever else we had in investment earnings, that'll help dictate in terms of how much money we could contribute from the general fund. I think last year we looked at and we said, taking everything into consideration, we had about $6 million above, I think, the Moody's threshold, which was the lower of the two, and we decided to use $3 million to contribute to last year's budget. Of that, I think there's $1.6 million that technically went in, and then $1.3 million that we used to approve near simultaneous appropriations, right, for the school buses.
It's actually about almost $1.8 million between the
$1.8
school security and the school transportation.
Got it. So that's the other variable. How much do we want to use on the general fund, and how much do we think will be coming back? And I assume with respect to the surplus, like the 1.1, 1.2 that we're talking about, there's no sort of there's no pre-buying or extra purchasing that you're going to be doing? I mean, that money will come back to the general fund?
Yeah, that's the projection now. A lot of that is coming from vacancies in the PD, the dispatchers, the officers, but we do have a couple other vacancies in other departments. So that's the bulk of those, the surplus.
For the Board of Selectmen. For the Board of Selectmen.
For the Board of Selectmen, yeah. The one item that I'm keeping an eye on is our legal expenses. I've mentioned it to you the last couple of financial reports. That is still running a bit hot, but.
What was the transfer we voted for?
130,000.
Have they taken that up yet?
That'll be going to them on the 8th. So we're moving within the legal budget from regulatory counsel to general counsel, 130, but that's not going to get us to the end of the year if we continue on the same trend. So that's one where I did project a pretty high expense on that. But other than that, I don't think there's really many possible surprisures.
What about permits? Aren't we running?
We're running a little low on permits,
Yeah,
so
we should
projection
look at
accounts for
that,
that too.
You should do your kitchen.
I'll do your kitchen.
I did a kitchen.
Thank
It's like
you.
we all got a kitchen.
So yeah, the permits, I have the request out to building department to take another look at that.
Yeah.
You know, given the last additional couple of months, the information that we have. So we'll follow up on that.
Yeah, let's just make that an item
Yep.
like
Yep,
the other
that's
ones
on
that Jim
mine.
reeled off. I think that's the only one I'm concerned with in terms of revenue that might be just trailing a little bit behind what we thought.
I did send out an email today with a lot of answers to the follow-ups that you had from last week.
Thank you.
You were very
thanks.
welcome. So what I'm going to do is start a list of changes. We know we have a salary change in general government. We have the slight change for the library, the information that we got from Park and Rec on the portable sound system, that can be reduced a little bit. I'll calculate for you guys what the part-time fire administrator, if we went part-time with that, what the impact would be.
And then what about any further update on the healthcare?
Healthcare, yeah.
We are meeting with the unions this week. I have given them a deadline of April 8th that we need to know if we've got MOUs with each of them or not. They're all aware it's all or nothing. There are some that are hesitant, so Susan and I did information sessions, 3 information sessions today, going around and meeting with groups from that bargaining unit. Not trying to change their mind, but just providing information. So we should know by your vote, and the date is not because of your vote, just so that we can get everything ready for open enrollment, but we should know by then if it's a yay or a nay.
And then the number built into your budget is the best offer from United. So if nothing happens and we can't move forward with this, that number is still, that's the number.
That's the number.
And so I think if all of our employee partners across all of our units were to agree to move to the state plan, then it was like another forward of 500,000 across everyone.
Yep.
And if they
$400 to
don't,
$500 reduction in the best United healthcare number that you see now.
Yep.
and if they don't, what's the number?
What is in the budget right now?
Yeah. So this is an incremental kind of 4 to 5 if.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
It's an 8% increase
right now.
right now from United Healthcare.
Yep.
Which could go down dramatically if we are able to.
It actually would be less next year than what we're paying in this fiscal year.
Right.
And it locks us into a 3-year contract, not a 3-year rate increase, but it does lock us into effectively a much larger risk pool that we're being priced, rather than like 200 odd.
Locks us into the contract. The rate increases for those 3 subsequent years are unknown.
Unless they change the parameters.
Unless there's plan design changes, in which case we can. But from what I've heard, they haven't made plan design changes historically.
Okay,
So-
all right, so don't count on that.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Good. With that, accept the motion to adjourn. Rob moves, Jenny seconds. All those in favor? Thank you. Thanks, Channel 79.